Hi, I am going live. I wanted to address some happenings in the world of the government. There has been a letter that was sent to government employees by way of the Office of Personnel Management, and it has definitely created a stir in the government community and certainly has trickled down effect to government contractors that as a company Power 3 serves. So I wanted to discuss the implications, the decision making process for a letter like this, and what to expect if you're going to move forward with it. Basically, obviously, employment is at will. You can resign at any time, and your employer can let you go at any time. There are some federal government unions. There are also some greater protections for federal employees, but there are also just standard things. People can be let go for a lot of different reasons. And what we don't know is how each individual situation will be handled. We don't know the value of each employee that's resigning. I know that there are people who are feeling pretty comfortable that their position will continue forward, and there's some who are wondering if they will make the cut when things shake up. And if you resign, you're basically saying, "I won't be here at some point." Um, as far as any guarantees of payment through a long-term period, uh, as pretty much um, any employer who was making that as a private employer would be hard to enforce if something changed. Um, if it was a lump sum payout, I think there'd be a little more breathing easy, but that's not what is being offered. It's not really a you get to quit now and get paid through September either. There can be decisions made based on factors that how do you dispute it? They could say, well, you resigned, but after evaluating things, we are eliminating your position anyways, and therefore, due to eliminating and restructuring, your position is done. And there's some restrictions to layoffs in terms of, um, generally speaking, if a position is laid off, they can't rehire someone else in that position within a certain period of time. However, they can restructure, change the level, change the responsibilities, merge it with some other position. There's a lot of ways to get in and out of this. If it's making you feel unstable and uncertain, my recommendation is always to do what serves you best with what you can sustain without assuming that you're guaranteed anything. So, um, we've seen people give their 2 weeks notice and be dropped instantly. And that's just a standard 2 weeks notice type of thing, and let go instantly, depending on a variety of factors. That doesn't always happen. And the government world can operate very differently. But all they have to do is remove your access and you're not getting in. Um, so those are factors to consider. And, I think that in the employment world, it's easy to take your work for granted. When you're an employee, okay, I get a job, I earned this job, I get my paycheck, and that's how life goes. But the reality is that nothing is guaranteed. Job stability matters significantly to the economy, and government job stability is probably one of the main drivers of our economy in terms of this sort of flow of money through all these people, especially in the areas that many of us live in. um, Government employment is huge. And so having to make decisions like that, if you rely on that money, I wouldn't trust it. And it's not because of who's offering it, it's because, you know, uh, life is cutthroat. And if there's a way out of it, they can take it. Can, but not sure if they will. But that's a risk that you take by accepting that. If you are looking for a change and you are wanting to resign, my word of advice is always to know where you're headed first. And, I know that there's sort of this thing of by February 6th, and then you'll get this opportunity. But that's to create a sense of urgency for people who are considering it. And I would not let that date affect you and affect your decisions. You may need to know where you're going to next before you pull that plug. The other thing to consider is if this does create sort of a mass exodus, now the supply and demand of the market has changed drastically. So if you and all your government cronies are all like, yeah, you know what? I'm ready for a change. Let's do this. And you're not afraid of the risk that they may or may not pay you through September. And now you go into the job market and you and all your cronies with all the same experience are applying to the same few jobs in the private sector. You're going to run into some problems. It's just a supply and demand thing. And in the recruiting world, we have jobs where you put out an advertisement for an hour and you get 100 resumes, and jobs where you have it out for a month and you get 0 resumes. And it just depends on the type of work it is, the type of qualifications it requires. And, so it's can shift the dynamics of a competitive marketplace. And so you will just be in competition with everybody else. And those are things to really consider when you're looking at what you're going to do next. I know that the details of the letter are important, and I am going to bring those up in a second. But from a personal standpoint, as someone who has mouths to feed and bills to pay, it's certainly not something that I would consider. If there was some ironclad contract that said they were going to pay you or there was an upfront lump sum, I would definitely consider that if I were in that position to make that kind of decision. But I would also still want to know what my opportunities are next. And what in the government realm translates over. Who would be my target? Where would I want to go? Do they even have openings currently that I could be considered for? So taking the time to do my research and look at those companies that hire the type of people with the type of skills I have and seeing if they have openings, and keeping in mind that sometimes they can post openings and those aren't really truly openings, or maybe they're on a hiring freeze because the instability affects them too. So those are things to think about. Which jobs are truly being hired for and what leverage you have to be the person that they hire. Sometimes, if a job is listed for 1 week, they've stopped looking at resumes after day 2. They've got so many resumes by day 2, they just aren't even looking. And so you can apply on day 5 and they'll never even see your resume. So let's look a little bit at the letter that was sent. There's some altruistic purposes to this. They want to, restore accountability. They want merit to be the focus of why people are working for their company, for the government, sorry. And, the government has always been known to have inefficiencies. I do think that there's a lot of people who can see that and agree with it in some ways. There's a lot of red tape, but there's a lot of processes and things. But it also kind of keeps the economy going by keeping people employed. And there's a lot of factors to that. Everyone in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion roles are scrambling right now, I'm sure. So, that's, by the way, not gone in terms of employers are still required to follow the law, Title VII specifically. But for those people in the government who held those positions, they may be looking at private companies now, and that might be a bit of a competitive issue as well. And, not very many companies are truly putting in the work and investment to be compliant. So you have to find the companies that are actually following the law and want to hire people to help them follow the law. So that's a factor. So depending on the position you're in the government, and depending upon your skill set and what's out there in the private sector and your ability to sustain risk, maybe you are that person that can look at it. Maybe you're close to retirement and you're going to retire this year anyways. And you're like, you know what? I might as well put mine in. And if they cut me off 6 months earlier than I planned, I'm still going to be out in Key West. So those are just all things to consider. So they built this offer around 4 pillars. The return to office pillar, which is the substantial majority of federal employees who have been working remotely since COVID will be required to return to their physical offices 5 days a week. Going forward, we also expect our physical offices to undergo meaningful consolidation and divestitures, potentially resulting in physical office relocations for a number of federal workers. This is sort of vague language, but what it really means is people are coming back to the office who may not have always held positions in office or haven't for some time, and they probably have to figure out who's sitting where and who's going to have what resources. You may be ordered to go back to the office and you may have nowhere to sit and work. Maybe, hopefully, they're looking at ways for people who live an hour outside of DC to not have to go into DC for a job, and they can go to some satellite location so that it eases the commute to some degree. These are substantial life changes. And I think there's a lot of people who are in remote work positions who are clamoring now because it's a big life adjustment. I know in the world of women government workers, female government workers, that's been a big issue because a lot of them really treasure that work-life balance and they carry a lot of the life load at home by working remotely. And that doesn't mean they're not running circles around people who are in office in terms of their work. It's just, if we know your physical location and we can keep you in this office for 8 hours a day, we know for sure that you were at least on the clock for 8 hours. And then that becomes that logistical issue of, if everyone comes back, where are we putting them? And how are we handling that? And so they're kind of warning you that there could be some changes. Consolidation and divestitures. Don't know what divestitures means in this instance. But, taking different directions with things, reorganizing, restructuring, who knows where you're going to land. The best way to breed instability and uncertainty is to not have a plan going into executing the plan. And that's what I'm hearing. It would be really nice if they waited till they knew what their plan was, they had an assessment. But this is, this efficiency factor is we're just going to jam it forward and see what happens. There's a case for both ways, but I think that the concern is it's a big lifestyle change. It's very sudden. And if they're not sure where people are sitting yet, I imagine it being a little bit of a travesty of sorts. As someone who's had to ingest a whole bunch of employees and figure out where they're going to sit and what they're going to do, it's not as simple as you think. So then let's talk about pillar number 2, performance culture. The federal workforce should be comprised of the best America has to offer. We will insist on excellence at every level. Our performance standards will be updated to reward and promote those that exceed expectations and address in a fair and open way those who do not meet the high standards which the taxpayers of this country have a right to demand. This is their way of shifting things on their head and saying, just because you're a government employee doesn't mean you're guaranteed a job. You better be performing. And this is sort of interesting because one of the tenets that I believe of remote work is that you're no longer managing people by time, you're managing people by productivity. And, could you get them into a system where it clocks their activity all day to make sure that they're active? Sure. Could a programmer fake that? Sure. So, having that performance level thing and saying, okay, we're driving for success. If you're not producing, you're not staying. I think that's fair enough. But having that channel into the millions of government employees is a process. As someone who has managed performance in companies, it's actually really hard to do. It's very time consuming. And you have to have managers who are performing at a level to ensure that their employees are performing at a level, to ensure that their employees are performing at a level, and that the directives are clear from the top. And so that performance culture is an issue. But there's basically saying, like, You're coming back to work and we're going to expect you to really perform. Okay, fair enough. Has there been incredible slacking going on since COVID? Potentially. I feel like things have been moving on as almost normal. But again, you have to manage remote work if you're going to have it. And if it wasn't managed well, that could be a problem. They want their third pillar to be more streamlined and flexible workforce. While a few agencies and even branches of the military are likely to see increases in the size of their workforce, the majority of federal agencies are likely to be downsized through restructurings, realignments, and reductions in force. These actions are likely to include the use of furloughs and the reclassification to at-will status for a substantial number of federal employees. What this means, in a nutshell, obviously, is they're getting rid of people, and they're going to use restructuring for that. They're going to reduce the number of people to carry the workload. Maybe they think that the 20 people who are doing it before could be done by 10. So you, as the employee remaining, might be the one carrying a heavier burden, probably with no extra pay. This realignments thing, who knows? Maybe they're trying to reduce the number of agencies and bring things back together, make it a little bit easier to manage. So the use of furloughs and reclassification to at-will status is interesting. Furloughs, everyone in government is familiar with, but it's hugely destabilizing to have a furlough. And I don't know if it'd be full force furloughs or certain areas of furloughs. I don't know if it's temporary furloughs or ongoing, but it's basically taking advantage of the tools that they have responsible. Now, going back to this resignation thing, if you're someone who's resigning and they want to do a reduction of force, who do you think they're going to pick off first? They're going to know that you already want to go. So that's something to think about. And that's why I say don't trust or rely on anything. So the reclassification to at-will status for a substantial number of federal employees. What they mean is, talked about it before, employment is at will in Maryland. And for the federal government, it's generally at will, but not all. And, what that means is you can leave anytime, we can quit you at any time. There's no real obligation. So what they're saying is if we had any obligation to you before, we're changing that to no obligation. And, it's one of those things where if there was a plan and this announcement wasn't just creating destabilization for the community at large, now everybody's trying to guess where they're going to land and what's going to happen to them. I think that's the problem. But they're definitely putting people on notice that their jobs are not secure. Pillar 4, enhanced standards of conduct. This one really gets me a little bit. The federal workforce should be comprised of employees who are reliable, loyal, trustworthy, and who strive for excellence in their daily work. Employees will be subject to enhanced standards of suitability and conduct as we move forward. Employees who engage in unlawful behavior or other misconduct will be prioritized for appropriate investigation and discipline, including termination. First of all, employees engaging in unlawful behavior should already have been prioritized for investigation and discipline. So that, you can just put that one aside. Okay, if you're doing unlawful things, that deserves investigation and it deserves action. Reliability is key for employment. And the loyal and trustworthy is interesting, and who strive for excellence in their daily work. That's sort of fluff, right? What does loyal mean? Loyal to what and to whom? To the purpose of the federal government, to the mission? Sure. You want people who believe in what they're doing. And, in the intelligence and defense communities, it's very important. That's why there's clearances and standards for those things. But that's already been a thing. So I'm not really sure what that means beyond, what we're already doing to ensure that the people we're hiring are as good of people as we can get, you know. And the loyal thing, as long as the loyalty is to the mission and the purpose of the agency for which they work, I think that's fine. I hope that, there's no political affiliation loyalty things that come into play with that. And I don't know how they're going to test loyalty other than, through the means that we already do, through clearances for jobs that require it. And, you know, the trustworthy thing is interesting because we already have code of ethics. There's already expectations on behavior. So this isn't anything new. And, maybe somebody in the government is getting away with murder. But then of course they should be, taken to task. I think some of these are just as they already were. And maybe it was just poorly managed. But the expectation has always been that you have good ethics, good conduct, and you maintain confidentiality of things that are meant to be confidential, and you behave in ways that are appropriate for the requirements of your agency and employment status. So I don't, I see these as sort of big grand statements, but a lot of it should already be being done, and maybe it's not working. Um, and some of it's a little bit uncertain and extreme, and it sounds like they want to make a lot of changes. And I know agencies go through restructures, and layoffs happen, and things like that. I guess the question is going to be, how does it affect people who want to resign? And in terms of what they choose to shake up and what positions they make redundant, and things like that. When I go down here, it says, if you choose not to continue in your current role in the federal workforce, we thank you for your service to your country, and you will be provided with a dignified, fair departure from the federal government utilizing a deferred resignation program. This program begins effective January 28th and is available to all federal employees until February 6th. Again, it's that short window of time to kind of figure out who's not loyal. That's how I feel it's trying to be stated, that if you don't want to be here, wave your flag so we know who you are in the next week. And that's a very short time to make a major life decision when most of us rely on our income and job stability. So it says, if you resign under this program, you will retain all pay and benefits regardless of your daily workload and will be exempted from all applicable in-person work requirements until September 30th, 2025, which sounds great, if you want that guarantee. And it says, or earlier if you choose to accelerate your resignation for any reason. The details of this separation plan can be found below. Whichever path you choose, we thank you for your service to the United States of America. So they want you to send an email, and they want you to type resign into the body of this reply email and hit send. This deferred resignation is not available to military personnel of the armed forces, employees of the U.S. Postal Service, those in positions related to immigration enforcement and national security, and those in any other positions specifically excluded by your employing agency. I know, being local to NASA, that people received it there. And, a lot of our client base is national security, so that doesn't really apply to them, and military, that doesn't apply. The, U.S. Postal Service, I'm thinking that eliminating those is mostly to do with the supply demand. They are probably understaffed, and I know those issues exist in some of those areas, and maybe not as easy to lose. Let's put it that way. So there's further language, and it's almost like they write your deferred resignation letter for you. And it says, please accept this letter as my formal resignation from employment with my employing agency, effective September 30th, 2025. I understand that I have the right to accelerate, but not extend, my resignation date if I wish to take advantage of the deferred resignation program. I also understand that if I am or become eligible for early or normal retirement before my resignation date, that I retain the right to elect early or normal retirement once eligible at any point prior to my resignation date. Given my impending resignation, I understand I will be exempt from any return to office requirements pursuant to recent directives, and that I will maintain my current compensation and retain all existing benefits, including but not limited to retirement accruals, until my final resignation date. I am certain. Notice it doesn't say until September 30th. It just says my final resignation date. Could that change? Could they require it to be changed? Could they furlough you? Could they do all these other things, restructure and lay you off? Yes. Could it be enforced in the court of law? I'm not a judge. I am certain of my decision to resign, and my choice to resign is fully voluntary. I understand my employing agency will likely make adjustments in response to my resignation, including moving, eliminating, consolidating, reassigning my position and tasks, reducing my official duties, and/or placing me on paid administrative leave until my resignation date. Again, they don't say until September 30th. Not sure how I feel about that. But it does mean that they could basically sort of render you obsolete prior to your resignation date. And what does that mean in terms of what they do with your position or how they, it's not like people on the resignation plan are going to be suddenly protected from furloughs. That's usually across the board. I am committed to ensuring a smooth transition during my remaining time at my employing agency. Accordingly, I will assist my employing agency with completing reasonable and customary tasks and processes to facilitate my departure. I'm not a fan of resignations longer than 2 weeks, and I have utilized the 2-week resignation standard for myself, even in situations where my instinct and desire would be to give a longer term. It just doesn't usually work well that way. So to have a, however, 6-8 month, I'm not even going to try to do the math right now. 7 or 8 month resignation period is a risk for the employer, which is the government. That people are going to still care and do their jobs actively. And maybe that's why they'll take some of their work away, especially depending on the sensitivity of it. It's hard to say. There's a bunch of sort of information that's not really that important to this. You will receive a confirmation email acknowledging your resignation. It'll go to OPM. Let's see. At the very bottom, it says OPM intends to use your response to assist in federal workforce reorganization efforts in conjunction with employing agencies. And that says C88 Federal Regulation 56058 and 80 Federal Regulation 72455, which I have not read, listing routine uses. Let's see. The interesting thing about it is they kind of don't really know what they're going to get, and anyone who sends it doesn't know how they're going to respond. It concerns me that I don't know the language in the Federal Regulation 56058 and 72455. That's something I'm going to research and look into a little bit further. And, this sort of reorganization efforts, I just don't know that they're guaranteeing anyone a job. There's nothing that I see in here that says, we guarantee that you'll have a job through your resignation date. And, it says that they'll receive pay and benefits through the resignation date, but it also doesn't say that you're guaranteed that resignation date stays in effect and doesn't get preempted by a layoff date. So I would be very curious to see who takes this up and learn what their experience is, which is going to take time to see how it goes. But like I said, if you're planning on taking this and you want a job in the world outside of government, or in the government contracting realm, you have till February 6th to really do some research if you want to take this up and see what you can get and do. Because I just don't think that it's going to be as simple as what they're saying. And I would not leap into the abyss unless you really trust that your skill set is um, highly valued in the work world and not a dime a dozen. So those are just things to consider. And I definitely welcome people leaving questions on the feed, and I'll do my best to research and give answers. Thank you very much. Again, this is Jenny with Power 3, and I'm here for answering questions. I do not have all the answers. I just have advice. My phone decided to do stuff. But, I just think that people should move forward with a sense of awareness and to understand that there are loopholes that exist. And, what I'm reading there wouldn't make me comfortable if it were a contract I had to sign. Let's just put it that way. So take care. Be well. Thank you.